Okay, so let's talk combining sentences. And let me tell you that we as a society have a really hard time with commas. Part of it is because we're so unsure of where to use them and where not to use them. And I can remember one of my high school teachers, and it was a French teacher, and the French do things completely different, although he was American. But he would say, when in doubt, leave it out. Okay, that's not the way to go with your sentences and your commas. Um, by the time, if you catch what I'm going to teach in this video, by the time you finish it and you get the skills under your belt, um, I think that you will probably take care of probably about 85% of commas, and where to use them, where not to use them. So I'm going to go over things really quickly in the hopes that if I do, maybe you'll come back and watch this again if you need a refresher. I also am going to post this document in Blackboard. So if I were you, I would, this is one of those things along with the transitions. This is one of those things I would print. I'm such a nerd. Print, laminate, put into a sheet protector, put into the front of a binder. This is the kind of thing you can use over and over and over again in any writing situation. I do have really simple sentences. It's not because I have a really simple brain. I just want to use really, really simple sentences so that you can remember the pattern of what we do, because it will help you in taking care of these comma issues, which in turn takes care of run-ons and takes care of some of our fragments. We kind of a little more run-ons on this than fragments. Okay, so I have these two sentences. It was raining, period. I drove slowly, period. Every sentence must have four things. It must have a subject, a verb, a complete thought, and punctuation. So these are two perfectly good sentences, although a little on the simple side. And if we had an entire paragraph of these types of sentences, somebody might think you're in third grade. So we obviously, your brains, and I don't see sentences like this for my students. Obviously, you are at the level of sophistication. A lot of the issues that we have in grammar is that we think much more in a much more complex way than how we can write. And there's a little bit of frustration with those two different levels going on, because you probably speak at a much higher level than you write. And that's very typical for your age and where you are in school. So it was raining. I drove slowly. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you several different ways to combine these. One, and I hardly ever, ever, ever talk to you about English teacher words. I'm going to use a couple of English teacher words today because it's important and because I think it helps you learn the concept. So one of these English teacher words are coordinating conjunctions. Do you remember the Schoolhouse Rocks video on the train and the conjunctions? Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Hooking up phrases and clauses and sentences. Had to get my thing right. Okay, so conjunctions are things that we use, just like the train, to hook things up usually at the end of our sentences or in the middle of our sentences. So there's only 7 of these. And think about the word coordinating. I'm wearing purple today. So if I wanted to coordinate my outfit, I might wear, and I have a pair of khaki shorts on right now. I probably wouldn't necessarily wear orange, although I have seen women that can pull off orange and purple, and they look fabulous. Just not me. Not my coloring, not what I look good in. But for me, a coordinating outfit would be khaki and purple, or black and purple, something like that. So think about things that go together. All right. I also say that these are like an equal sign. Okay. And there's 7 of these words. And there is an acronym to help you remember what these 7 words are, and that is fanboys. For, let me come over here. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So when you have 2 complete sentences, like my 2 sentences up here, and you want to combine them, and you want things to be an equal level on my arms, it's funny trying to do this on video. You want to do things in an equal fashion, you have a full sentence on one side and a full sentence on the other. And here's an example of it. I don't have examples. Why do I not have examples here? Well, let's just put one in. Oh, here it is right here. I knew I had examples. It was raining, comma, so I drove slowly. I have used one of the fanboys, and I also call these comma words because when you use them, if there are 2 independent ideas, when you combine them together, you have to have a comma here. If you don't, it is a run-on. This is by far the number 1 sentence problem I have that I see in student writing. So if I keep writing run-on, run-on, run-on on your paper, this is probably it right here. You might have these 2 ideas joined with a fanboy, but you might not have that comma. And that turns into a run-on, or that becomes a run-on. If you didn't have it at all, and you just had the comma, it's still a run-on. It's 2 ideas, but they're not combined properly. And I would say that's the number 2 problem that I have. So it was raining, comma, so I drove slowly. We could use the word and, that A there. It was raining, comma, and I drove slowly. Could we use the word but? It was raining, comma, but I drove slowly. And I'm going to say no to that. I hope you did too. The word but is a U-turn word. It is the opposite of what we would expect. So if it was raining, I would expect you to drive a little more slowly because you're being cautious. So if I said it was raining, comma, but I drove slowly, it feels a little off. If I change the word slowly, we could use it. It was raining, comma, but I drove quickly, because that's out of the norm. That's the opposite of what you would expect. And the word but and the word yet both give you an opposite feeling. These are also words that are transitions for the contrast pattern, if you think back to that teaching that I did. So we use one of these words that would make sense. There's only 7, and you can remember them with the acronym fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And the comma comes, I know I've added commas after, but the comma comes before the word, all right? And this is why I also, like I said, I call them comma words. All right, so those are coordinating conjunctions. And remember, I said earlier that these are 2 independent ideas. That means they can stand on their own. So think about what independent means. Independent means I can stand on my own. So I have a 19-year-old daughter. And when she decides I need a new job, she will go to the place, fill out applications, or do it online. If they call her in for an interview, she will take a shower and get dressed up and look professional for the job interview. And she'll go out, she'll drive herself to the job interview, and she may or may not get the job, but she's been able to do that all on her own because she is independent. All right? Think about a 5-year-old. Say that I told, when my daughter was 5, say that I told her, okay, Grace, it's time to go get a job. So go upstairs, take a shower, get all dressed. I've laid out your clothes for you. And she comes downstairs. She's done her hair. She's gotten her shower. She's got her a little business suit on. And I hand her a briefcase, and I show her the door, give her the car keys, show her the door, and say, okay, honey, go on your interview and tell me how it goes. All right. And now, would I ever do that? Of course not. She's not able to drive. She wouldn't be able to see over the steering wheel if she could get behind the wheel and know what to do. And why is that? Because at 5, children are dependent on their parents. So they are not able to do things on their own. So when I say that a sentence is independent, it is a sentence that can stand on its own. And in this sentence, we have 2 independent ideas. They can stand on their own, but we've combined them. All right. And that's why I say it's like an equal sign, because both of these sentences are of equal value. They both are independent ideas. All right. We kind of change things up with this item here, because we are changing one of our sentences to a dependent idea. It is now dependent on the other idea to complete it. And it's kind of funny because usually, these sentences are really simple. And usually when we have simple sentences, your English teachers in the past may have said, oh, give me more, be more descriptive, right? Well, when we add these words, and they're called subordinating conjunctions, when we add these words, we pull them down from an independent idea down to a dependent idea. But we've added a word, but it takes away its independence. All right? So if I were to say, after it was raining, this is our first subordinating conjunction. And by the way, this chart is not the only set of subordinating conjunctions. They're just some of the most common ones. And think about what subordination means. Many of you are probably from the Hampton Roads area, or you are familiar with military life. Think about subordination. What does that mean? Think about what insubordination means. That's not a very happy word, is it? Insubordination means that you are not doing something right. If you're in the military, or if you're on a job and you are told you are being insubordinate, or you are being written up for insubordination, you can lose your job for that. If you're in the military, you could get put in the brig for that. So it's not something you want to do. And what it means is you're not following orders. So think about the word part, sub. Sub means I am an ordination. Ordinating means order. So subordinating means I'm going to put myself under. So in the military, we put ourselves under a commander or a higher rank person. Sub, like subway, it goes under. Submarine, it goes under something, right? Submarine means under the water. Subordinating means I am choosing to send myself under somebody else. I am taking somebody else as the leader, as the boss. So that's what subordinating means. It means to bring down to a level. And some of these, even though we're changing it from 2 different independent ideas, sometimes these sentences can be really rich. And these ideas can add a lot of flavor to our writing. In fact, we want to kind of mix things up a little bit. We don't want to always do these coordinating conjunctions every single time. This is what I work on in my own writing, because I have a tendency to write these compound sentences. It's 2 complete sentences put together. That's a compound sentence. Think about like a compound word, right? So these compound sentences, 2 independent ideas joined by one of these 7 words, with a comma in front of that word. And here we go. Independent idea, comma, fanboys, independent idea. So that's the pattern. So we want to mix things up, though. We don't always want to do the same thing over and over again, because then our writing can be a little boring. We want to mix things up and keep our readers interested. So another way that we can do this is by using these subordinated conjunctions, and there are lots of them. All right. So I drove slowly because it was raining. And the word because is right here. So that is one of the coordinated conjunctions, and we can really put it, the great thing about the English language is we can flip things around. I drove slowly because it was raining, but if we want, we can flip it. Because it was raining, I drove slowly. Now, the other interesting thing here is that the main idea that we want to put forth is usually in that independent idea. So the focus here is I drove slowly in both of these sentences. It was because it was raining. If I walked up to you on the street and said, because it was raining, and I turned around and walked away, you would be thinking, what? Finish the sentence, finish the idea. That is an example of a fragment. Because it was raining, if that's the only thing I have, you do not have a complete idea. But if I say, because it was raining, I drove slowly, then you have the full complete idea. Say you are late getting home, you're past curfew getting home, and mom or dad is sitting up waiting for you, and they want to know, why were you late? Well, I drove slowly because it was raining, or because it was raining, I drove slowly, right? So you're giving some information here, but you're kind of accenting it a little bit or giving a little more detail because it was raining. And then mom and dad are probably going to be happy that you were careful. So hopefully that's how that conversation goes. So in this first sentence, I drove slowly. Again, that can stand all by itself. If I walked up to you on the street and said, I drove slowly, and turned around and walked away, you might not know why I said that to you, but you'd have the complete idea. I drove slowly is the independent idea, and that's what this is here. Independent followed by the dependent. Because it was raining, again, that's the dependent side, right? Here we've switched it around. We start with the dependent. Because it was raining, I drove slowly. So in this case, we're doing the second line here. Dependent and independent. And notice the comma right there. This is, kind of my cheat sheet notes here for you. When we start the sentence with a complete idea or an independent idea, we do not use the comma after, all right, before that dependent idea. However, if we use the dependent idea first, it becomes an introductory phrase. This is probably by far the most common. I know I said that earlier with the, this is by far the most common comma issue. It's not a run-on issue if you don't do it. It's a comma issue. This is by far the most common comma issue that I have. You put a comma after an introductory phrase and ask yourself, is it an introductory phrase or is it part of the full sentence? Well, I drove slowly can stand all by itself. So that is the main sentence. That is the subject and the verb and the description of how somebody drove. Because it was raining is extra information. So because we started that, just like the second line here, because we started that sentence with dependent, then we use this comma. And this is how I remember this. I like to make up acronyms for myself. And so I have put in the DC acronym, like Washington, D.C., very close to Hampton Roads, right? If you put a dependent idea first, then you use the comma. And so that's why I write DC, as a way to help myself remember which time I use the comma and which time I don't. All right. So again, you can go through these. You can, whenever it rains, I drive slowly. Whenever I drove slowly, it was raining, or something, something along those lines. Some of these work, some of these don't. Here is an example of a short introductory phrase. Yesterday, comma, it was raining, comma, so I drove slowly. So this is that coordinating conjunction again. But I wanted to highlight that yesterday is a short introduction. It's a time word. And so we use that. We use the comma there. All right. Here is a semicolon. That's the comma with the dot above it. We can use a semicolon when we have two related sentences. Okay? It was raining, semicolon, I drove slowly. We wouldn't do something like, it was sunny today, I did my taxes. There's really no relationship between those two. So if we have two relatively short sentences, they don't have to be this short, but if we have two relatively short sentences combined together, instead of doing a period or a comma or a semicolon, or a coordinating conjunction or a subordinating conjunction, we can also do this, this semicolon. The vast majority of Americans do not know how to do this. They do not do it well. If you do this, it is impressive, because most people don't know how to do this well. Remember that this, just like the coordinating conjunction, this is an equal sign. On both sides of this semicolon is an independent idea. So that's an independent idea. That's an independent idea. And they are closely related, so we can put them together. And that's the last thing that I have here in this cheat sheet. Independent, semicolon, independent. You notice the second one is not capitalized. In this case, I start with the word I, which is always capitalized, so it's not a great example. But let's go down to my second example. I went to the store, semicolon, the dog went with me. So those are two relatively short sentences. They are highly related, and that second sentence does not have a capital T. All right? The last thing that I'm going to show you is certain words, and there's probably 7 or 8 of these words. I want to say it's not really important. I want to say there's something like a subjunctive subjunctive conjunction. Not important that you know this. Things like therefore, however, whereas, those kinds of words, there's not very many of them. If you use them in American English, this is how we do this. It was raining, semicolon, therefore, comma, I drove slowly. Again, much like the semicolon up here, not very many people do this well. If you are used to doing 2 commas, that's the British way of doing things. So if you grew up not in America, you may think this looks funny, but in America, this is how we do this. And in regardless of, if you can do this, it is slightly impressive, because most people do not know how to do this. So if you can do this, take a 5-paragraph essay, do it once, maybe twice. Don't overuse it. But if you do it once or twice, then the person reading your work, a professor or, a boss, will probably be impressed with your grammar skills and might give you some street cred with your grammar. All right. I don't know if I've used that word properly, but anyways, that is how to do those things. And if we were in class, I'm not going to make you do it this week because we have a lot going on, but you can see that we could take a couple of sentences. They made plans to go. They ended up not being able to make it. So those are two sentences, and I'm going to change how I do this. So they made plans to go, but they ended up not being able to make it. All right, that's one way to do that. Another way, they made plans to go, however, comma, they ended up not being able to make it. And then let me see if I can come up with a subordinated conjunctions. Sorry, conjunction. Although they made plans to go. Now the question is, comma or no comma? What do you say? The dependent idea is first, right? This although, again, if I walked up to you on the street and said, although they made plans to go, and then turned around and walked away, you wouldn't have the complete idea. So it's the dependent first. And if we remember DC, dependent, comma. They ended up not being able to make it. All right. So this is a very fast teaching on how to do commas, how to fix run-ons. I am always in the middle of grading papers. So what I would ask of you, especially because I'm not going to ask you to do, at least for this first initial class that I'm doing this for, I'm not going to ask you to do any practice exercises because you have so much other writing that you're doing this week. Go into your essays and look to see if you can combine sentences using these rules. And if you fix this problem before I grade something, it's just going to make that paper that much better. It's going to be that much easier for me to grade, and I am all about that. If I've already graded, it's one of the ways that you can revise your paper. It wouldn't, usually revision is not only the grammar and punctuation, but it certainly is part of revising a paper. So whatever piece of writing you're working on, you're waiting for me to grade, maybe I've already graded it and you want to rewrite it, go into your papers and change using these rules, these 4 or 5 different things that I've just showed you. Go back into your papers and look to see if you see the problem. And a lot of times, if you have a problem with this pattern because you keep forgetting to put the commas in there, that's a really good problem to have, because now that if I have 2 independent ideas joined by one of these 7 words, I have to use a comma. And that's, once you start recognizing it, you will see it everywhere. You'll see it in the things you're reading yourself. All right, that's it for this video. I hope it helps, and have a great rest of your day.